Hello and welcome to Ashes of the Imperium. My name is Dan, and as ever, I'm joined by the wonderful Max. And today we are speaking all about the Adeptus Custodes.
Yes, as you know, subject close to my heart.
A subject very close to your heart, and a subject that we wanted to revisit because there have been some developments in Custodes land in the form of a brand new detachment. And it's a detachment that I think really brings the Custodes to life. Obviously, Max, as a Custodes fan, you're quite excited about this, aren't you?
Yeah, 10th edition has been a bit of a roller coaster with regard to rules and how the Custodes feel. And the latest detachment, a nice free detachment that we get, which is brilliant, has got them feeling as close to the lore as they can, I guess, without being silly and ridiculous, which is always a problem with 40k factions, isn't it? If you were to truly represent.
For sure.
But they feel good. They feel in a good place at the moment.
And that's important. And I think that's something that we kind of focus on here on Ashes of the, which is bringing the lore to the tabletop and helping you do so. So which detachment represents which kind of vibe of a faction, and whether it's appropriate, whether it's perhaps underpowered, as we've seen perhaps Adeptus Custodes before. So I suppose we'll dive right in. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, yes, there's slides now. It's very exciting. I won't lie, I'm pretty proud of these. So
how much time did you spend on backgrounds there, just getting the right content? Anyway,
we're like, should this be slightly darker, slightly lighter? Should there be more grain? Viewers on YouTube, listeners on the podcast are like, what the hell's going on here? I just want the audio goodness into my ears. But if you're watching on YouTube, clearly there will be slides or visual elements. So please, we'd love to hear your feedback. If you are listening on Spotify, then jump over on YouTube and drop us a follow and drop us on the comments whether you've been a long time audio listener only or a video YouTube listener. Anyway, on to the Lions of the Emperor. So, as you said, Adeptus Custodes have changed their rules over time. And Max, do you want to run us through kind of how those rules have developed and evolved?
Yeah, super quick, super top line. At launch for 10th edition, everybody got their index, and the Custodes index, the rule was you have martial stances, which they've kept all the way through. At the start of the fight phase, you can choose whether your units have sustained, lethal, or at that time, -1 to hit in combat, which is good, gives you a bit of flexibility. And the army rule was a 4-up, feel no pain against mortal wounds. Okay. Now, the issues with the index were mostly to do with stratagems and kind of unit composition. So you could take, if you wanted, 10-man blobs of Custodian Guardians. And the issue was lists at the start of 10th edition were basically 30 custodians in 3 10-man blobs with a captain sitting on objectives, giving fights firsts, re-rolling all hits, re-rolling all wounds. It did, it felt like Custodes Horde mode. It was not how they should play, I think. Massive blobs of infantry is not what you think of when you think of Custodes. And then the code. No,
I can kind of see the kind of the shield wall kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a bit Imperial fisty, but I can kind of see this indomitable wall of golden warriors protecting the golden throne. Perhaps I can kind of see that in some respect, but they're not a horde army, are they? They are an elite force, right?
They shouldn't play like that. And it was not dynamic. It was sat on because you wanted to sit on objectives with them so that you could benefit from their re-roll all their wounds rule.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't encouraged to move. Your shield captains were attached there to, it was a boring way of playing, and it was not a lot of fun to play because your opponent would charge into them. You would use your shield captain to trigger fights first so that you would fight first after the charge. And because you're a custodian hitting on 2s, you would hit all the times with sustained. You would then wound all the times because you're re-rolling, and nobody liked it. Nobody had fun against that. And in the early stages of 10th edition, they did well in tournaments. Custodes were performing really well because they were an unkillable, unmovable brick of infantry sat on objectives, which, okay, saying that out loud, that sounds like quite a lot like Custodes, but it just didn't feel right. You read the stories, you read about their fluidity in combat and their speed and their grace, and how they are not an army; they act as individuals, and it just it didn't feel right. for me.
Okay, and we're gonna touch on sort of the various different lore aspects as we go through. So take us through what happened next.
Yeah, so they were strong, right? They were strong at the start of 10th edition. No question about it. Then the Codex came, and if anybody wants to, and they haven't listened to it, they could go back to our Codex review episode and
listen to Max. Listen to Max get very, very grumpy.
Yeah, so they made some good changes. You know, they cut the unit size from 10 to 5 maximum. That feels more appropriate for me. When you read about how Custodes fight, they're in small pockets across the greater army of, you know, Space Marines and Guard or whatever it is, whoever it is they're fighting with. So that little pockets of elite works for me. But none of the detachments were good. The rules were lackluster, and it was just a very, very disappointing book. I think at launch, it was probably, you know, one of the worst codexes that we've seen in 10th edition.
In what sense? You know, you say it's worse, as in power, or
both? I think, yeah, because well, it had 4 detachments, and only really 2 of them were viable.
Wasn't one of them a Sisters of Silence detachment anyway?
Yeah. So one of them was pure Sisters of Silence. There was one that was take your sisters and your Custodes and they benefit each other, which was okay. That was quite a good one.
That's right. Oh yeah, I'm remembering it now.
There was one that was all focused around characters, but they've changed it since. But at launch, the units that the characters were attached to did not benefit from the rules, so it was only ever really affecting 5 models in your army, which was not great.
Okay. So what we're saying there is a bit of a lore rules disconnect. You know, there's the question there: was there a lore rules disconnect? Dear reader, I will put to you that perhaps there was. I think you've either got this golden blob that doesn't really feel right for the narrative of the army, or you've got these rules that don't really represent like their flexibility. Perhaps, and
I think so. I think they didn't feel elite. Put it that way. They
and the power. I think the power comes with the eliteness, right? Because they are clearly the Emperor's Custodes, so they need to feel powerful. And if you've got a codex that is giving you kind of sort of slightly lackluster rules, then they don't really feel powerful, and they don't feel like the force that they're meant to be, and the force that they're represented as in the lore.
No, they definitely didn't. They changed it. They improved it. You know, they made tweaks to the codex. They made tweaks to the data sheets. And before this new detachment came, they were fine. You know, they're good. They were in an okay place. But this new detachment, I think, really captures the essence of how Custodes should play on the tabletop. And it's we'll go into the rules later, but it's a really simple detachment rule that just captures that, I think.
Okay. And now, was this detachment a Grotmus detachment?
No, it was, so the Grotmus detachment we got was the vehicle-focused one. So, you know, buff up your dreadnoughts and that kind of thing, which is okay. It's decent. It's another way to play them. That
using all the kind of the Forge World Imperial armor.
Yeah, that's it really, because the only other vehicle in a Custodes, you know, from a basic GW standpoint, is a Land Raider, and
so it's all a spray build Land Raider. Yeah. Exactly. So that's really interesting actually, because that's something we don't see as much these days. Is like the Forge World stuff is heresy stuff, right?
Yeah.
But these days, there's a massive shift away from what I would consider like Imperial armor units, because obviously back in the day, Forge World would produce these gorgeous books called Imperial Armor, and in there you would have all these cool, crazy new kind of units that some people thought were overpowered. And then as we then transitioned into kind of 8th edition and beyond, you had Imperial Armor, you know, Astartes and Imperial stuff, or you had Imperial Armor Xenos, and all these, and then there were the PDFs for it. And so you don't tend to see that. These days they're all getting put into Legends or separate PDFs, whereas actually kind of releasing a Grotmus attachment and saying, yeah, no, this is completely legit and a modern way to play Custodes. That just feels slightly
it's against the grain. Definitely,
it is against the grain.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think it's symptomatic of the fact that the Custodes have so few data sheets.
Yeah.
You know, it was just a nice extra thing. But no, this new one was released at the latest balance update, along with a new Tau detachment, which is really nice too. But it was just a random detachment that they gave us completely out of the blue, and
the new Daka detachment as well for orcs.
Yes, yeah, that was the third one, wasn't it? Yeah.
There,
Sorry.
who shone brightly but
Too
briefly.
brightly.
Too brightly, too briefly. I'm, we don't have cameras on, but I am saluting the death of Daka Daka. Yes, I think yes, perhaps the orcs, they enjoyed their time. It's very orky, actually, what happened, isn't it? It's very orky. Of like, they basically discovered a super weapon and just weren't, with great power comes great responsibility, and they're like, nah. we ain't having that, boss. And they just went full in.
Well, they timed it up to 11. They blew themselves up, right? Yeah.
Love it. Very orky. Right. So, should we kind of move on and talk about how the custodies are represented in the lore, and then we can talk about how perhaps the rules represent that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Max, tell us. Imagine I'm a complete noob, which perhaps doesn't take a huge amount of imagination, but imagine I'm a complete lore noob and don't know what the Adeptus Custodes are. Can you tell us a little about them?
Dan, you are a basic human, right?
Okay. Yes. No. But what about in Warhammer 40k? Enough about me in real life.
So, imagine a space marine to you is what a custodian is to a space marine. That is the kind of scale jump in power and fighting prowess that we're talking about here. So, guardsman to space marine to custodes. It's the same jump in scale. There's sections in the books where a custodian is fighting, squads of space marines, and it takes 20 space marines to take him out. It's they are super powerful. So we know that space marines are gene crafted, enhanced humans. It's quite gory, isn't it? The space marines are like cut open, bits stuck in, stitched together, bits placed under. It's a messy process to create.
They are like the Frankenstein monsters,
exactly,
of the 41st millennium.
Yeah,
and also like stolen as children away from their planets. It's a very physiologically and mentally traumatic process, isn't it?
Yeah, like there's the Emperor's Spears. Aaron Dempsey Bowden's book. The people on the planet who become space marines, they're called the ghosts, and the normal humans on the planet sort of shun them because it's like that's the specter of my child that I lost. I don't want to look at it. It's dark, right? And dark, and it's dark and it's gory, but you get a badass fighting machine at the end of it.
Okay, yeah, cool.
A custodian is not cut up and sewn together and bits shoved in to make them stronger. From infancy, they are gene crafted. They are a bespoke suit as opposed to the mass-produced polyester suit of the Adeptus Astartes. Okay,
if Thunder Warriors wear a tracksuit from Sports Direct, the Space Marines are a suit from Top Man,
sure,
or Burton.
Yeah, and the Custodes are your. I don't think either of those exist. No, they're gone. We're showing our.
I'll do it.
We're showing our age here. But yeah, the custodians are the Savile Row bespoke suit of this, right? Okay. So it takes a lot to make one. They are crafted at the molecular level through unknown technologies. And as opposed to the Space Marines, which are often, at the sort of pre-adolescent stage when they're taken and started to, start the process to transition. It starts at infancy and they're not taken, they are offered up. It is an honor, and often from the noble houses of Terra, is where the custodians are drawn. It's a privilege to have your child become a custodian.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So they are masterpieces of genetic creation, and that makes them practically immortal. Huge, strong, muscular, fast, peerless warriors, artists, scientists, historians, authors. They're like true Renaissance men and women. They are.
God, this sounds like my CV, Max.
Yes, I know. You would hire a custodian if they were interviewing for you.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. But there you go. Talking about hiring and jobs and things like that. It's an interesting point, because in the same way, going back to our sartorial metaphor, in the same way, there's a time and a place to wear a cheap suit. Maybe you're going on a big boozy stag do or something like that.
Sure.
And it's going to be a bit messy. Or you're kind of doing fancy dress, and the fancy dress is something that involves, you're going as James Bond, and you're going on to the bar dressed in a dinner jacket or something. You don't want to wear your Savile Row bespoke suit, do you? Because
You do not. You don't want to ruin it.
you don't want to ruin it.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
So
You need your fighting suit, and you need your posh suit to wear to weddings. So, and I suppose like I see that in like Space Marines versus Custodes because they both have their roles, and I think Space Marines still have their role of they're kind of like they're designed to get their hands dirty, and they are in like the mud and blood of the Imperium, whether it's the 31st or 41st millennium. Whereas Custodes, I feel like they're a bit more aloof, bit more kind of a step away from that, and their role has changed from the heresy into, I suppose, like the Dark Millennium, or whatever, like the normal 40k, and then again has changed subsequently in the Indomitus Crusade.
It has.
I can't remember the name for the pre period, like the middle period, just like normal 40k as we grow up.
Exactly. Yeah. Vanilla 40k.
Vanilla 40k and kinky 40k.
Pre-Cadian destruction.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Great Rift type thing. So tell us a little bit about how that kind of role changed.
Yeah, sure. So pre-heresy, pre-Great Crusade, they were the Emperor's bodyguards. You know, that was their function. They were the companions and the bodyguards of the Emperor. There's some interesting lore tidbits, like he made them to have a friend that was his equal, which is quite, sad. He wanted some companions that he could kind of converse with on the same level as him. So, he made them to be these fantastic humans. They were the end of the Thunder Warriors as well. The Emperor made the Thunder Warriors this blunt instrument to win the unification wars. The Custodians were the ones that finished them off, which is quite bleak, literally finished off the Thunder Warriors. But then, pre-heresy, throughout the Great Crusade, they're the Emperor's bodyguard. They are deployed on particular missions of importance, like there were the Custodians at the Council of Nicaea, for example. The Custodians accompanied the Space Wolves and the Sisters of Silence to Prospero, to sort out Magnus as well.
I mean, that is one of my favourite books, being a big Thousand Sons fanboy. The whole like Prospero Burns versus Thousand Sons, those two books, just like the representation of Custodes in those books, and in general, like the wider heresy. I'm on Siege of Terror at the moment. I'm still very slow reader / audiobook listener. So I'm on Siege of Terror now, and Constantine Valdor, who is like, I suppose, like the Primarch of the Custodes. Like he's not a Primarch clearly, but he is the equivalent of a Primarch to the Custodes, right?
Yeah, he's almost the same power as a Primarch. Like he would give them a good fight, put it that way.
And yes,
I think maybe someone like Lorgar he would probably beat. But anyway.
Yeah, well, so he's a badass in the books as well, and it's interesting. He's seen as like a peer, and in some ways, like he's kind of seen as like above a peer. By like Rogel Dawn, when they're kind of doing when they're like talking to the lords, the High Lords of Terror, they kind of, Rogel Dawn kind of like allows Constantine to kind of like contribute to and sort of respects his kind of input to demonstrate the kind of show of unity.
Well, that goes to their role shift. So when the heresy kicks off, they still have an incredibly important function as the Emperor's bodyguard, but they also become one of the principal assets for Rogel Dawn during the Siege of Terror, right? Mm-hmm. They are a force of 10,000 highly elite soldiers. They are a critical asset for him in the defense of Terror, so they take a much more active role in the defense of the palace. That is their primary function, but they become a lot more militarily involved than they have been. Before that, during the Great Crusade and the time before, they are peerless warriors, but they don't actually do a lot of fighting. They're protecting the sentinels in the Imperial Palace. There's one particular duty where a custodian will stand at the throne for 100 years and they're not allowed to leave. They're underutilized, you might say, but that is their role. That is their function.
Oh man, can you imagine? When you like go pick up your wife from the station and she texts you and she's late and you're like, oh, okay, I've got to sit here for 5 minutes and like sat there on your phone and 5 minutes feels like ages. Imagine being there for 100 years.
Yeah.
It's no good life.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, they are in this role, very important for defense of Terror, very, very important in the War in the Webway, when Magnus unleashes the demons into the
Naughty
Emperor's
Magnus.
project. Very cool story. But, spoiler alert, the heresy ends, the Emperor is not well. And they take it quite hard. It's like the Secret Service who loses the president. They go into mourning.
Bit of a Pyrrhic victory, really, isn't it?
Very much so. They go into mourning. They're not seen for thousands and thousands and thousands of years until the modern era, when the Cicatrix Maledictum happens, the Great Rift opens, the second siege of Terra begins. Terra is beset by demons. Again, the Custodes are called upon to defend the palace. Very cool books around that setting as well. And, when Guilliman returns and launches the Indomitus Crusade to reunite the broken Imperium, he and Trajan Valoris go out. The Custodes become a ranging force again. They are a force across the galaxy. They are out there fighting for the Imperium. They're not confined to Terra and the palace anymore. They are a fully fledged set, in the unification of the broken Imperium. So they really kind of, have shifted their, where the Astartes have had the same role throughout their history, the Custodes have switched and pivoted.
Agile. They've been on an agile course. They did a scrum thing.
Yeah.
Like have a rebrand.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they have secondary functions, like they're intelligence agents for the High Lords of Terra. When a custodian becomes old, it, slows down a bit, he'll become an eye, one of the eyes of the Emperor. And this 8.5 foot tall man will put on a cloak and skulk around and
and become a spy, and no one will know that he's there.
Yeah, exactly. But there are some very good characters in there as well, and some awesome stories. Some of my favourite books from the Horus Heresy series. Well, one of them is Master of Mankind, which tells the story of the War in the Webway. And throughout all, the Custodes stories, what is always apparent is how individual they are. They don't necessarily, they fight in squads in a big battle, but we're talking 3 or 4, and it just sort of, it's where they happen to be in the battle almost. It's not like they're, squad 1, squad 2, squad 3, go. They are a kind of army of individuals, and they fight in such a way. And, some of my favorite characters in the heresy time, there's in Master of Mankind, it follows a custodian called Ra and Endymion. Amon Teramachian as well is another really prominent custodian in the heresy era. A lot of my favorite Custodes characters, their arc seems to be, I am a perfect custodian and I love the Emperor. Oh no, my faith has been tested, but now I see the truth. And there's that sort of the same arc that, like, I've written some notes on 3 of my favorites. Valerian from the kind of modern era, from the Chris Wright books. Ra and Endymion and Amon Teramachian from the Heresy are, some of my favorite stories. But the kind of common arc is that, they start off as the perfect ones, and something shakes their faith. For Valerian, it's seeing how corrupt the Imperium is and how broken it is, and it's the Sister of Silence, Alea, that kind of opens his eyes to that. For Ra and Endymion, it's seeing the War in the Webway and the true, the sort of true power of the Emperor. And there's a really cool quote actually from Ra. He says, "We were made to protect him," being the Emperor, "and we do not understand him, not truly, not ever. What does it mean to be loyal when you are created without the ability to betray?" So he's kind of questioning his
Deep.
Like, oh man, I've seen what Dad can do, and I'm not sure I like it, but am I loyal to him because he made me that way? Or, so
Interesting.
yeah. So they're real individuals. If a Space Marine questioned his Primarch like that, he'd get a slap probably, right? Like, there's not.
It's almost like, apart from the kind of macro shifts and betrayals of like the heresy, you don't tend to get Space Marines that are as free thinking as that. But I think that kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier about how like the Emperor created them to be almost peers, who can be a peer to an emperor, to the Emperor, in fact. But he created them to be free thinkers and semi peers and companions, and so they have this ability to, I suppose, think critically about their role and their position in the universe.
Yeah, like during the Siege of Terra, Malcador asks Ammon, who has been close to the Emperor for a very long time. He's one of the sort of first amongst the elite of the Custodes. He's very, very good. He's a very good custodian. And yeah, Malcador.
He's a good custodian.
He's a good custodian. But he's asked to investigate the sort of nascent imperial creed that's popping up as in, during the Defense of Terra. And he finds these cells of sort of faith, and rather than destroy them, which his kind of gut instinct tells him to do, like, the Emperor is not a god, religion is bad, I must smite these down. He is sort of convinced to see their utility and see their power. And then when, spoiler alert, when the demons come, they prove quite useful, right? But he's always evaluating his beliefs. He's a flexible kind of fighter. He's not stuck to the Codex Astartes or anything like that. And that's how they always behave in any story that they're written. They're, master investigators, they're master fighters, they have no equal amongst the kind of mortal forces of the Imperium. And yeah, I just love how well-rounded they are sort of portrayed in the books. There is nothing that the custodian cannot do. There is nothing that they cannot achieve.
That is
and all the
excellent
stories kind of
segue,
point that.
Max, because like we've basically covered like who they are in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now it'll be useful to kind of go on a little bit to how that is then brought to life in the rules. And now we've covered previously about how we didn't really feel like the rules were necessarily representing. Oh, like we've just, Max has just gushed very enthusiastically about Custodes. Obviously, he's a fan, and so therefore is well qualified to tell us whether or not the rules represent their awesomeness on the tabletop. And kind of what you were saying is before they didn't. You weren't really feeling that.
No, the brick of 10 stood on an objective does not, to me, speak of Ammon on his quest and Ra and Dimian, somersaulting over the Sisters of Silence in the webway and Valerian taking down the Bloodthirster at the Eternity Gate. It doesn't hit those notes for me.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
It was powerful. It was, it's probably quite well representing the picture, the artwork you can see here. Right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
That's sure.
Looks like 3 squads of 10 right there, Max. Don't know what you're talking about. You maniac. Yeah. So I think this is what I was talking about, like the kind of golden shield wall.
Yeah. There's a place for it.
There's a place for it.
And it represented their power
for
sure, but it wasn't fun to play against. It wasn't fun to play, really.
No, it didn't feel like Custodes.
No, it didn't feel flexible.
Okay.
It didn't feel adaptable. It was like, I have one strat, I have one, it wasn't right. Then the Codex comes, they lose all their power. This detachment, I think, with the tweaks that have been made since the Codex dropped as well, to some weapon profiles and that kind of stuff, just to buff a few things up, really hits the nail on the head for me. So, against all odds, the Custodians are outnumbered on every battlefield that they fight. No matter the foe, no matter their number, the Lions of the Emperor will prevail. And That's
cool. That's cool.
Yeah,
because it's like, that goes back to what you're talking about, is that they're not a horde army. And we'll see this in a second. I also realise I have written, if there are no friendly units within 6 feet of that unit. Clearly that's 6 inches. We need to, Max, you didn't do a very good job of QCing these slides for me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bad co-host. No, bad me for writing the 6 feet. Clearly it's 6 inches. But yeah, this represents like the elite nature.
Yeah.
How do you represent on a tabletop the fact that they are often fighting alone? And actually in the lore, that alone often means one custodian.
Yeah. Yeah.
Clearly you don't buy them in one custodian. You can't run them. Foreshadowing. Maybe you can. You can't run them as single custodians. But I think this rule plays into that vibe of solitary units or solitary elements of custodians fighting a battle or a war or an action.
Yeah, it does. So, how do we represent that these guys are elite and lone operators and small unit guys? I know what we'll do. When they are 6 inches away or more from any other friendly unit, we will give them +1 to hit and +1 to wound. It's very, very simple. But immediately that encourages small unit sizes spread out across the board, because you don't want to be close to your friends, because you're a lot more powerful when you're not. And having played this list a couple of times, having played this detachment a couple of times, what I've found is I've got a real mixed unit force. I've got fast stuff and slower stuff, and I've kind of got layers going. I've got stuff that pushes out immediately, and I've kind of got stuff that's hanging in the back a little bit, and then, the mid board. So I'm spread out all across the board with some uppy downy shenanigans as well with my turn.
Some uppy downy shenanigans.
Yeah, exactly.
Like kind of like deep strike.
Exactly. Yeah. And pick up and put down and all of that kind of stuff. And I've got small unit sizes because I want to keep the footprint small and, maximize my kind of benefit. And I've got units all across the board, and they're doing actions, and they're, their shooting is buffed up because, hey, +1 to wound with a lot of shots hitting on 2s is gonna, it's gonna do some damage into anything. Even vehicles with your simple sort of bolt gun guardian spear, you're going to be wounding on 5s. And for custodian guard, you're getting reroll 1s and reroll all if you're on an objective. So yeah, the fact that it encourages you to spread out, and the fact that it encourages small unit sizes, really, when you look at it on the board, I'm not there in a line. I am all over the battlefield in my little pockets, my little golden pockets. And that to me feels like the way that custodians fight when they're written about. Even at the Siege of Terror, you've got thousands and thousands of Astartes fighting each other, but then dotted within that melee are a little unit of 3 custodians there and a single custodian there taking down a demon, and then 1 or 2 here killing a horde of berserkers, and that is, I can picture in my head when I'm looking at my little 6x4. I've got my custodians here, but then on the battle grid next to that, there is, 1,000 Space Marines fighting it out. And on the other side, there's 10,000 guardsmen. And it just feels better
Yeah.
That
That makes complete sense. And also, what I like about this is there's no negative for not achieving it. There's obviously the opportunity cost of not having it, but it's not like if you are within 6 inches, you have a debuff.
No.
And also, it's interesting that it goes, if there's no friendly units within 6 inches of that unit, add 1 to the hit roll and add 1 to the wound roll. Whereas often you see a detachment rule that's kind of says something along the lines of, if there are no friendly units within 6 inches, add 1 to the hit. And if there's no friendly units within 12 inches, add 1 to the wound roll. Also, they often do like a kind of almost like a layered buff where you have it kind of takes it to the next level.
It's like 2 conditions to meet. Yeah,
exactly, which makes it harder to meet but more rewarding for you to do so. Whereas this doesn't, which is quite interesting. I wonder whether maybe let's say this becomes like the absolute bogeyman list. I wonder whether that's perhaps something you could add in, or you just change it to 12 inches or whatever.
Yeah.
But on the smaller board sizes of modern 40k, 12 inches is a 12-inch bubble is like, because this isn't just 6 inches in one direction. This is a circle of radius 12 inches, right? Oh, sorry, 6 inches.
Yeah.
A diameter of 12 inches. That's my strong
there
maths.
There you go.
Oh, my school maths teacher would be so proud. But yeah, okay, it's cool. I like it. So should we move on and see what other ways? So before we do so, do you like this detachment rule? Do you think it's too powerful? Do you think it's appropriate? Do you think it represents them well?
I think it represents them very well. That island of awesomeness in the violent melee of battle that the Custodes fighting should be, little pockets dotted around, facing unsurmountable odds. It hits the right note. It's fun to play because you are being more tactical.
I also think that the point you made there earlier about you're playing on a board, like a gaming board, but that action might just be, let's say in this image you can see a horde of custodians fighting against some orcs, but in the background there's a city. There's and you can see jet bikes flying, but there's no Imperial flyers. There's no Valkyries, and there's no drop pods, and there's no whatever. You can't see that because this art is all about the Custodes. But actually, your action on the tabletop is representative of normally of a wider conflict. And yeah, for every squad of custodians, that perhaps your 2,000 point army represents, a Custodes kind of task force, there's thousands, tens of thousands of like baseline humans, like holding onto the las guns, conscripted into service. Whether they're conscripts or professional soldiers, there's just this morass of kind of human detritus firing their little las beams, and there also might be Astartes. There might be Space Marines there of various different chapters. This might be a crusade. This might be some other action. Like, I like that this rule specifically, by making them separate, even though all those people don't exist in your game, it does kind of make it feel like they are the pockets, as you said, golden pockets of awesomeness, which sounds like a sugary American cereal, but I think it is. It makes me feel like they are pockets within a wider force, and you might imagine that the blank spaces on your board are actually filled with like thousands of conscripts. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The narrative in my head as I'm playing, that's what I'm seeing for sure.
Nice. So, moving on to enhancements, and we're gonna talk about these, and you might be thinking, wait a minute, Dan, Max, you're very like lore focused. What are you doing, smashing up the rules here? Because the reason why we want to talk about the rules, and I'm conscious I've written 6 feet again on First Conqueror. I'm just like, that's the only thing I can see on this slide. I can see nothing else but my mistakes.
You're a perfectionist. You're a perfectionist.
I know. A good servant of the Emperor should be. So we want to talk about how these enhancements represent kind of what Custodes are all about. So, superior creation, the cellular alchemy by which this heroic warrior was forged, has rendered them breathtakingly resilient. Not disgustingly resilient, which is very noble, but breathtakingly resilient. And I think we mentioned earlier about how they were created. They aren't Frankenstein monsters. They are this kind of sculpted, David-esque statue of perfection, kind of like my blood angels. Got to get that in there.
Well, there's no black rage.
There's no black rage. Okay, so maybe not quite like the blood angels. But yeah, I think this talks about that refined process of the Emperor creating them. And so, what does that look like in actual rules?
Well, if your bearer of this relic is destroyed, you roll a d6 at the end of a phase on a 2-up. So there is a very good chance that this will happen. They get back up. They get back up as close as possible to where they were destroyed. They have their 4 runes remaining. It's a redo, basically.
And that blows my mind. Like 4 wounds.
Yeah, 4
not
wounds.
It's not just
D3
1 wound, or D3, or even D6 if there's dudes with more 6 wounds. 4 wounds. That's so good.
Yeah. On Trajan Valores or just a shield captain. It's.
I will jump in there because
you can't give it.
Can't give special characters enhancements.
No, you can't. You can't.
Cheating. Sorry, cheating.
Sorry.
Yeah, no one beat me in the last 40k game we played.
But yeah, on a shield captain, that is very, very strong.
That's very
because they're such force multipliers as well for your units. That the fact that they can get back up again, it's there is even a case that could be made to, once your unit starts taking wounds, to allocate them to your captain. You could use him as a bit of ablative. He is the hero. He stands up. He stands in front of his sort of peers, and he is the exemplar. He takes the hit, but then stands back up again. There is a case for that tactically and narratively.
You're saying lots of very narrative words. Obviously, I'm hearing gamey as heck. I can read between the lines, Max. I know what you're like. But no, I do know what you mean. And also, not only that, but I think it also encourages kind of last stands and, like epic challenges and like throwing himself into the fray, the shield captain. You can afford to lose him because he's going to get back up. Yeah. And it's giving like finale scene of a movie where the hero is knocked down and just draws on his last reserve of strength to defeat the big bad.
Yeah, it's the Captain America grabbing Mjolnir moment at the end of Endgame, isn't it?
Oh, what a moment, Max! What a moment!
Captain America would be a custodian if he's got that vibe.
And he would be worthy. He would be worthy for sure. Oh man, that film! What a there we go. Getting all Very excited. Right, okay, so one more from me. So Sidious, fashioned by the Terran armorer Anna Chevokachin. Max, your Russian's probably a little bit better than mine.
Just because I'm married to one.
Exactly. Could we invite Mrs. Max in to pronounce that? Anyway, a famous Terran armorer, Anna Chevokachin, in the last years of the 32nd millennium, so kind of, quite shortly after the Horus Heresy, the stunningly worked Sidious is a singular artifact. Nestled within its golden form are a series of micro-shield generators and stealth emitters. Employing a modification of displacer technology, the shield generates small, localized displacement bubbles at the point of impact, literally beaming bolts, bullets, and the tips of blades harmlessly away from its bearers. So, why do I like this? First of all, the rule gives lone operative and stealth, which is cool, right? What does lone operative do, Max?
Lone operative means that you cannot be targeted if you are more than 18 inches away from the shooting unit.
Okay. If you're on your own, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And stealth is +1 to cover.
-1 to hit.
-1 to hit.
Yeah.
My bad. See, this is why Max is here, because he knows the rules properly. And so, yeah, there we go. So we've got two things there, which I want to expand on. Lone operative. We've spent all this time banging on about how they're kind of like, they stand alone, they work individually, they often aren't found with 3 squads of 10 next to them. Lone operative, like, it speaks to that. It also encourages you to like play them in a way that perhaps represents the kind of older custodians when they get sent off, rather than kind of getting sent off to pasture and being like an administrator or something. They get sent off to be these kind of cool spy dudes, right? What are they called again, Max?
The Eyes of the Emperor.
The Eyes of the Emperor.
And it's 12 inches, sorry, not 18. It's even better. 12 inches. Yeah,
There we go. Well checked. Lone operative, yeah, like lone operative and stealth. I think it's very Eyes of the Emperor.
Yeah, it's Eyes of the Emperor, or it's the Blood Games. It's the single custodians sneaking into the So the Blood Games are the kind of war games that the custodians do. They break off and they try their best to get into the Imperial Palace, and they fight each other. It's like there's no holds barred. To try and achieve it. So they're really kind of testing their own security and their own systems against other custodians, because who better to, fight and discover the weaknesses than the Guardians themselves. So it kind of fits into that theme as well. Maybe the bearer of his relic is a victor of the Blood Games.
Oh yeah, that would be cool. Right, yeah. Max, cover us off the next two for me.
Okay, so Fierce Conqueror. This Captain Commander has trained extensively to face multiple foes at once, knowing that the Custodes will always be outnumbered. That just fits everything that we've been talking about.
Yeah,
these
tick.
people in the throng of the melee. And the rule is awesome. So it's a shield captain only. At the start of the fight phase until the end, add 2 to the attacks characteristic of melee weapons equipped by the bearer for every 5 models within 6 inches. Within 6 inches. So they have to, it can't be just, going into a unit of 30 and you immediately get all those extra attacks. They have to be close. But if you are going into a big horde of Hormigants or Orc boys or something, there's a very real possibility that you're probably going to have about 10, maybe 15 models within 6 inches of you. So that's 4 to 6 extra attacks on your shield captain, who already has 6, 7 attacks anyway. So, you're rapidly getting up there in terms of the number of attacks, and it turns them into a real blender.
One thing I'll point out is the first 2 aren't shield captain only. And I think the character you could take them on is like a blade champion.
Yeah. So you could give the superior creation to a blade champion for sure. You could give lone operative to a blade champion. Yeah.
Whereas Fierce Conqueror and Ad Monimortus are only shield captains.
Yes.
However, I will point out that shield captain as a keyword covers off both shield captains on foot in like normal armor. Normal Custodes armor, shield captains in Alaris Terminator armor, and shield captains on Dawn Eagle jet bikes.
Yeah, they can all take them. Yeah.
They can all take it. So what I quite like here is that Fierce Conqueror, you could put that on a shield captain on a jet bike, and then you can use his mobility to get up the board and fly himself, not only you're getting a double whammy, not only are you tying up a potentially dangerous horde unit and keeping it further down the board than otherwise it might be able to use his movement to get up because you're engaging it, but then also you're then decreasing it by, like, clearly they're probably going to beat him ultimately, but by the time they come out of that fight, they're going to be significantly degraded because they've been getting 2 characteristics for every 5. You charge into, like, you're probably getting like at least 4, if not 6 attacks.
Yeah. For most hordes, definitely.
Yeah.
But even like lots of chaos units, lots of space marine units are run in 10s. You're going to be getting at least an extra 2 most times you're going into them. Like it's always going to be firing. Unless unless you're going into monsters and stuff. But
and what I like about the Dawn Eagle thing is that if you do have 10 Space Marines, you can fire up your Dawn Eagle jet bike down range as quickly as possible, so that you get to them before they
get to
8 to 9 models.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that's very cool. I like it.
It's not as strong as some of the other 2, I don't think, but it fits how a Custodes fights. It fits the narrative,
I think it's not as strong because its trigger is more situational.
Yeah, definitely. But you could, like, if I had a friend who had a demons army, and I was like, right, let's recreate the second Siege of Terror, and send your blood letters at me, and we can be defending the Eternity Gate. I could give this to my shield captain, and rather than use for Valyrian rules for Valyrian, I could play him as Valyrian and recreate those moments where he's scything through the demon hordes. Be great fun. Be really cool. Yeah. And anyway, the last one, which is one of my favourite words to say, I think, ad monem mortis.
Ad monem mortis.
Yes. So this is a relic of the Dread Host, who are a specific shield host of Custodes. This towering blade was wrought to make a bloody example of those who dare to set themselves against the might of terror. And this is probably my favourite enhancement of this detachment. It's a shield captain model only, again. Improve the strength characteristic of melee weapons equipped by the bearer by 3. The armor penetration and damage characteristics of those weapons by 1. So give it to a shield captain with axe, and you have a flat 4 damage weapon, which is just great fun.
Crazy.
Yeah, great fun. So, this is just representing the superior kit that the Custodes have. They are the best equipped of any Imperial faction. And the martial prowess, right? Like, a single custodian with their artificer weapons can take on any threat.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. It's interesting that they all kind of interlink in theme. And I like this set of enhancements because they are all consistent. They are consistent with the narrative theme. So Superior Creation is about, like, lone warriors standing up against all odds. Praesidius is about lone warriors and being hard to target, and that kind of intelligence sort of network of theirs, but it's lone warriors. Fierce Conqueror is, again, lone warriors, but also martial prowess. And then Ad monem mortis is martial prowess and kind of tying into, like, Praesidius, like, cool kit and, like, all technology. So it's very narratively consistent. So not only is it a good set of rules, which is always lovely, the reason why I think we both like it so much is that it is narratively consistent with the established lore, whilst delivering the good rules under that banner.
And it synergizes so nicely with the detachment rule as well, because you've got your little pocket of custodians with their shield captain. They're miles away from any other unit, but because your shield captain has Ad monem mortis, and you're getting +1 to hit and wound, they are exceeding and outperforming all expectations. They are taking on targets far bigger and tougher and more numerous than them, and they are coming out victorious because they are the custodians. It just fits. It just feels right. It feels how they should.
So we've seen how the enhancements bring the lore of the Custodes to life. Now we're going to cover off the stratagems. Max, do you want to run us through the first 3?
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing to say about all of them is they are all a single CP. So your shield captain can trigger these on his units for no cost once battle round, which shows his, leadership and tactical acumen. And right, it's perfect. Like the fact they're all 1 CP is brilliant. So, Gilded Champion. The shining champions of the Adeptus Custodes are looked upon in awe by all who witness their grim arts. Their judgment is without flaw, and their tactical acumen utterly impeccable. So an Adeptus Custodes character can use their once per battle ability 1 additional time. So for the captains, that means they can use all the stances in a single combat thing more than once. For Trajan Valorous, he can use his Moment Shackle again. So, you can trigger his 12 attacks another time in the battle. And I think it shows a couple of things. I think it represents how the Custodes leaders are unequaled in terms of their brilliance and strategic mastery. But I also think it can be used to represent how they can, dig deep on those reserves and just pull out the battle winning moments, the crunch moments when they're most needed. So really, really cool strat. Then we've got Defiant to the Last, which is the harder the battle, the heavier the losses, the more resolute the lines of the Emperor become. And this
also, it does make them sound like a football team.
It does a little bit, doesn't
the Lions of the Emperor, they're playing West Ham.
I think they'd win.
Anyway. I reckon so.
4+ to fight when killed in combat, and a 2+ for characters before they're removed. So if you have a unit that is going to get minced, then you can trigger this, and they will hit back before they are removed. So again, just shows they're, resolute in the face of unsurmountable odds. Even when death is certain, they will still give everything that they've got to, achieve the mission. And then we have Peerless Warrior, which is a battle tactic. With every strike, the Lions of the Emperor prove themselves the masters of single combat, even when engaging the mightiest foes. And that gives a unit precision in the fight phase, so you can pick out the key characters of your enemy when you're fighting them. And again, the Custodes will cut the head off a snake. Like, there's numerous passages in the books where the demon prince has been targeted first, or the cult leader. There's a really cool section in the Emperor's Legion books by Chris Wright where they're storming a cathedral that's housing a chaos cult, and the Custodes sprint right to the pulpit and cut the head off the corrupted bishop, and it sends all the cultists mad, and it really kind of shows how they'll do that.
Nice, like it. So the next 3 are strategic ploys. They're all 3 strategic ploys. This is one of my favorites. I love it. Unleash the Lions. So, heroic bands of Terminator armored custodians engage entire armies in unrelenting battle. And yeah, this just hammers home that point about the Lone Warriors thing. But this is so cool. And I mentioned it earlier, the foreshadowing. You can't run an army of single custodians. Well, now you can. I love it. So 1 Alaris Custodians or Aquilon Custodes unit split into single models units. So again, Aquilons are the resin Forge World ones.
They are. Yeah, they are.
So it's really cool to see that a core detachment, is this core, because it's not in the codex, it's kind of the expanded one. But it's core, this is the balanced data sheet. It's now core.
It's only the 6th detachment that the Custodes have, so it's
yeah. But it's really cool to see them have access to these these rules that affect the kind of the Imperial armor units. So that's very, very cool. Maneuver and fire, another strategic ploy. So the Adeptus Custodes are unrelenting in their advance, laying down punishing fire even as they maneuver to new positions. So yeah, just kind of hammering home that kind of tactical acumen, warlike precision that we discussed. Shoot and charge after falling back. It's fairly straightforward. Yeah. Swift as an eagle. Again, this is another great one, which is although every custodian is devastatingly fast on the battlefield with preternatural reactions to match, the Lions of the Emperors are outstanding even amongst their peers. So this represents, I like that they're outstanding amongst their peers. So I like it it's this unit is a little bit better. This unit can react a little bit quicker, or maybe they've devised a cunning scheme. It's very reminiscent of the Alpha Legion trait in 30k in Horus Heresy. So being able to kind of move when you get shot at, or teleport in the Alpha Legion's instance. But this is 1 non-vehicle unit can move d6 inches after being shot at. So I'm glad they've put in non-vocal there, so it does stop, like a Terminator field Land Raider just like teleporting up the
Yeah.
wall.
Yeah, for sure. Or just a Custodian Guardian field Terminator, Land Raider. It's good. You can use that to close distances for charges. You can use it to make charges more difficult. You could use it to duck behind cover so that the enemy wastes their plinky plonky shots at you. I'm just going to duck behind this ruin now, and your gladiator lancer can't see me. Oh well, So there's that tactical flexibility as well.
There is. However, it is only d6, so
Yeah.
you could just roll a 1, and then half
Yep.
your body is still, not around the
Absolutely.
corner. So I think I like it. It's kind of lore appropriate, but I think it's one of the cooler ones, but it's one of the weak ones personally.
Yeah, for sure. It's the weakest, I would say, of the 6 detachments stratagems that we have available.
So, of the ones that we've just discussed now, are there any that you think are the best?
Maneuver and fire is very, very good. It's always good to be able to fall back and shoot and charge because, as a custodian, you are doing most of your damage in combat. So if you can maximize that, then that's great. The Unleash for Lions is perhaps the most fun, I think. The fact that you can split your Terminator units off. So you could trigger that and then, oh no, I've pulled engage on all fronts. I'm gonna split my 4 Terminators into 4 single units. I'm gonna use their once per battle ability to put them into deep strike again. And now in my in my turn or my opponent's turn, I'm gonna rapid ingress them and 1, 2, 3, 4 board corners, just one single model. I can find a 9-inch gap for that, and I'm maxing out my points on engage on all fronts, and those are the 4 victory points that win me the game. And it's just that kind of individual brilliance represented in the rules that the custodians can kind of pull off. That's a really, really fun one.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think that, again, is the kind of the tactical brilliance of the custodians. So yeah, love it. Let's see. So Max, you've done us a little sample army list. So we've discussed what we like about them in the lore. We've discussed how we feel the rules have brought them to life. Max is going to now chat us through his idea for a 2,000 point list as of the 8th of April Munitorum Field Manual.
That's right. Yeah. So this is a very simple list. It's 2,000 points on the nose, which is always good. But it is very kind of character heavy. Okay, so I've really leaned into the heroes of the Imperium and their mates. So these shield captains in this list, that could be Ra and Ammon and Valerian, and then the custodians who they're supporting. That's Custodian Guard Ricky and the guys in the background in the books, right?
Custodian Guard Ricky.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, they have a lot of names. I'm sure that Ricky is.
They do. Yeah. Ricky and Bianca.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh shit.
So to start with the characters, we've got 2 shield captains on foot. Just for a bit of variety, I've given 1 the Guardian Spear, and I've given 1 the Shield and Pyrite Spear. So we've got a bit more Dakar, and then we've got a bit of an anti-tank option there as well. And then 2 shield captains on jet bike, and I'm taking the Hurricane Bolters on both of those. They have their Interceptor Lance, but I'm spending the points to give one of them the Admon and Mortis enhancement. So extra damage, damage 3 on his lance now. Plus 3 strength, plus 1 AP. So it's now at AP 3. Very, very good. He's a real, threat. He can hit anything. And then the final character is Trajan Valorous. He's very, very powerful. With that stratagem, he can use his Moment Shackle twice per battle. All of his Moment Shackle abilities are very, very powerful. So, the fact you could give him a 2-up invulnerable save in 1 phase and then use the stratagem and then give him 12 attacks in the fight phase, it really represents the fact that he is the first amongst the very, very best. And you can really power him up in that. So the 3 foot slogging characters are each going to be accompanying a unit of Custodian Guard. And I've gone for 5 Custodian Guard with the spears there. So, a small footprint, it's 6 models. You can spread them out across the board. You can get that 6-inch distance very easily. And it just, it really represents that hero of the Imperium and his supporting. It's those little pockets of gold again that we were talking about when we, saying how these represent the Custodes so well. And then the final kind of other data sheets we have a unit of 3 Alaris Custodians for Terminators, so we can use that. Unleash the Line stratagem. These are kind of like the utility piece. These are really handy for sort of secondary objectives. They are, they give a good mobility. Again, you can really easily proc the Detachment Rule and get that 6-inch distance. And then they're very, very powerful. And, very, very hard to kill and tough to kill. And final 2 units are 2 units of Virtus Praetors, so the jet bikes. And each of those is a 3 bike squad. So we're only talking about 9, 24. There's 30 models in this list, right? So it's not a lot. Everything has got a very small footprint. There's a good mix of speed and deep strike, so you can spread out very easily. And you can make the most of that detachment rule. And each of those units individually might not seem like much. But once you get that +1 to hit and +1 to wound, and you layer on the fantastic stratagems that this detachment gives you, and the fact that you've got a captain in every foot squad, and you can use those stratagems for free, you very, very quickly kind of ramp the power level up on this. And what seems like a fairly kind of bog standard list becomes really kind of punching above its weight. And that's exactly what I think a Custodes list should feel like. Like, I have not got very much on the board right now, but every single asset I have is capable of taking down any threat, achieving any objective, and that's just so cool to me.
Yeah, very cool. I like it. I like how you've got a character in every single unit. I think it's very thematic. So almost every single unit, right? So 2...
the Terminators don't.
The Terminators don't. But the Terminators are Terminators, right? But also you can then do Lions of the Lions stratagem on the Terminators, and then like their characters in and
3 characters, almost, exactly, right?
Yeah. That's pretty cool. And if it isn't obvious in how we presented it, like 3 times Custodian Guards at 215, that means 3 times units of 250 points each.
It does,
yeah. So I like it. I think the problem with having such a tight list, it's 2,000 points. Would you be tempted to try and find the points somehow for another enhancement? If so, what would it be? Perhaps could you drop the 1 sort of 5 Custodian Guard to another unit of Laris to give you another 20 points? Could you spend that on another enhancement? Or do you think
I think you could. I think you could definitely. Like, there's a lot of opportunity to play around with this. You could take a unit of 2 Alaris if you really wanted to just use them as utility pieces. And then, that gives you the points for an enhancement. You could drop 1 unit of Custodian Guard down to 4. And then you've still got a 5-unit, 5-man unit, including the captain, which is still a decent utility piece. There's lots of room. I think if I was going to fit another enhancement in here, I would go for the Superior Creation one and try and get that on one of my shield captains. Yeah. I've kind of maximized units in this one, but Admona Mortis is too cool not to take. So that was
for sure. Too cool not to take, too cool not to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
And do you own all these models, Max? Do you have this army?
I've played this list 3 times now.
Okay.
And had a lot of fun with it. It's performed really well. Going into World Eaters, very, very melee focused force. Like, there was a unit of Custodian Guard taking on Angron, and they did most of the damage to him. He finished him off. Then another unit in the next turn came, and they got their 6-inch buff to +1 hit and wound, and finished Angron off. And the jet bikes were like picking out the key targets. The Exalted 8-bound, they got charged turn 1 by the jet bikes with Admona Mortis. That was like his key unit off the board. It's a fun list. I want to try some Sagittarum in here as well. Those are the Forge World shoot guys.
Yeah, they're very cool models.
Because they can just sit in the backfield, get +1 to hit and +1 to wound, and just stay there 6 inches away.
That's interesting because they get the buff they would get the buff. Yeah, like that.
Yeah, that really buffs up their shooting, you know.
Yeah.
So you could have a couple of units of them, and then some custodian, you know, shield, spear guys in the midboard, and then maybe some Virtus Praetors pushing right up. So you've kind of got that tiered list again, you know, backfield, midfield, front field. So yeah, there's a lot of fun you can have with this. You know, you are limited in Custodes with the data sheets you have available.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got about 6,000 points of Custodes, so I've, you know, there's lots of stuff I can drop into
Some
here.
flexibility.
Yeah.
Like it. Well, it's interesting that you obviously wrote this before you'd played it,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of create this episode structure, and then you've subsequently played it, and you're like, yeah, this does work. This is good. So yeah, it just goes to show, really. So I think in summary, like, this attachment is, for me, a really, really cool way to bring the lore of the Custodes to the tabletop, and I don't think we've seen it in this way in this edition, have we?
No. This is the best that they have been, and I think this is one of the most representative detachments of a faction's lore that we've got at the moment. There's some fantastic orc ones, like Bully Boys is spot on.
Oh my god, yes.
There are lots of good, you know, the retaliation cadre for my Tau feels like your Commander Farsight with his battle suits, and you know, there's some awesome stuff. But considering the journey that Custodes have been on this edition, the fact that we now have this to play with, and it's free, we got this for free, is, you know, like, really well done. Like, it's great that they are giving this much attention to tweaking armies, and fixing what is broken in you know, quote marks.
Yeah, I'm with you. No, it's really good. I would quite like to revisit the tactical brigade detachment for the orcs. Being a fan of the Blood Axe Commandos, I think perhaps that's a future episode. I feel like that is an interesting way to bring that element of the lore to life. And I suppose when you've got a detachment that does that, it's encourage you to try new things. You know, maybe Custodes weren't your thing. You know, maybe you're a Sister Silence person and you think, hey, you know, I've never really done it for me, and maybe this detachment is kind of what's encouraging you to try something different. So yeah, if you like this detachment, we'd love to hear from you. Obviously we've got our socials up there on the screen, so if you're watching this on YouTube, then obviously subscribe, comment, and share it around. Instagram, you may have noticed our Instagram handle has changed from AOTI40K. Is now we're just Ashes of the Imperium, and I think that's representative of the fact that, you know, we want to touch perhaps on some heresy stuff in the future, and Ashes of the Imperium, that's who we are. That's what our handle is. You can fire us an email at ashesoftheimperium@gmail.com, and you can find us on, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can also find us on Spotify, Apple, and all the usual places for podcasts. And if you're listening to us on one of those usual places, you can also find us on YouTube. So thank you very much for joining us, Max. It's been a pleasure chatting, Custodes. It's nice to see you do so with a smile on your face.
I'm finally happy. Exactly. Yeah.
We'll wait until the nerf hammer. We'll see what happens next. We'll see what happens next Balanced Data Slate. Until next time, keep calm and crusade on.